Well, hello. It is Tuesday, November 2nd, and you are watching TNS Live. This is the special that we do every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. And we have incredible guests who we get to have deeper conversations with, unedited, not necessarily responding to like the newsiness of the day. And there is a lot of news right now. This is where you get the heartier stuff. And of course, we start off here on YouTube and we continue on Rokfin. So if you have not joined us on Rokfin yet, rokfin.com/Nomiki, that is where you get the full TNS live. But you get a little piece of it on YouTube, and you get it on Twitch, and you get it on all of the podcasty places, as well as patreon.com/the Nomiki Show. I'm really excited because today we are going to have a wonderful conversation with our friend Shahid Buttar. Shahid, I called him. We can bring him in while I'm introing him. Shahid, of course, ran last cycle against a woman named Nancy Pelosi for California's 12th district, and scared her, I think. And he has recently announced that he is running again. He's currently a candidate for the congressional seat in the Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area, in California 12th, Nancy Pelosi's district. But I like to call Shahid the ideal clickbait guest, because I think people who've done media, like cable news media, get this. I used to be one of those guests that was in rotation like 5 times a day on cable news shows. And they used to say like, oh, you could just talk about anything. I'm like, well, I don't know everything. I just like memorize a few things and then, topics get recycled. But on these shows, it's harder to talk about everything because you have deeper conversations and you can't just be like 3 talking points in and out. Like I read an explainer, I can go on TV, fight with a stupid Republican. I'll always be smarter. Bam. That's my secret sauce. But when you're with actual intelligent people on these long form shows, it's not so easy to be the clickbaity person who can talk about anything that the audience wants. Shahid is a lawyer. He has been an activist for years. He really does his research. You have a great team who's always reaching out to us and saying, Shahid, you can talk about this and this and this and this. And I'm like, climate change, the Patriot Act. Like I've got to, this is what I got going right now. So Shahid, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Nomiki. You're telling me that something's working, and I appreciate all the supporters reaching out to you.
Listen, I don't give compliments out unless I mean it. So, and I don't give insults out unless I mean it. So beware that.
It was a very kind introduction. I appreciate it.
So Shahid, we are going to talk about a couple of things just to tease it out to everyone right now. We're going to start off with the Patriot Act 20th year anniversary, and then we're going to move on to some Nancy Pelosi, like what's happening in Nancy land, and how is Congresswoman Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, handling this important piece of legislation that seems stuck on Capitol Hill. I don't know if she's seen the how a bill gets made into a law, the Schoolhouse Rock, but maybe someone should send her and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and obviously Joe Manchin the Schoolhouse Rock episode where a bill becomes a law, because they don't seem to know how that works. But we're going to talk about that second, and we might touch on some COP26 conversation about what's happening right now in Scotland, and not a number. That's where I was a few weeks ago for a climate event, but in Glasgow, where world leaders are meeting to decide what day we're all going to die. All right. Shot it. This is why you don't get me doing live shows at night. My jokes suck.
The nihilism creeps in after a long day. Is that it?
Yeah. Well,
nice. I mean, it's not. You have every reason to be. God, don't get me started. Well, hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about it. I think there's a lot.
Let's discuss the Patriot Act. Let's just start off for the youngins in the audience who are not old enough to remember the Patriot Act and how it came about. Can you just do a brief summary reminder of like, what is the Patriot Act? How did it happen? What did it do?
So the Patriot Act was the first in a series of laws passed by Congress that vastly extended the power of the government to spy on Americans. It was passed in the immediate wake, just weeks after the 2001 terror attacks that shocked the country, stunned the whole nation. Everyone was riveted to their television screens for weeks, during which Republican, particularly lawmakers, joined by their Democratic colleagues, pulled off the shelf a set of longstanding law enforcement requests for intelligence powers that Congress had previously denied. And then Congress passed a 2,000-page bill that many members confessed to have never read that set us off on a continuing course, eroding civil liberties, expanding surveillance powers. People think of this as an erosion of privacy, but what has alarmed me from the very beginning is not just the threat to communities, but particularly to speech, and through that, dissent and ultimately democracy. We've witnessed the slow but steady consolidation, ultimately, of authoritarianism in the United States in the last 20 years. The Patriot Act was a crucial inflection point. I don't want to pretend that it was the beginning, because frankly, there were bills even in the 90s that passed under the Clinton administration that started this trend. And we could go back even before. So it's really hard to trace if you want to go to the very beginning, it's the Second World War, though even that's not fair, because the FBI was infiltrating and rounding up labor activists even a century ago. So, it's sort of like inherent in policing becomes this project. But particularly in the last 20 years since the passage of the Patriot Act, there's been this expansion of surveillance, and it's never been subject to a debate. It poses a profound threat to democracy, and it's long overdue for Congress to overturn this and restore some era in which the Fourth Amendment meant something, which it has distinctly not since it was passed.
And it was renewed, multiple times. And I think what was interesting is, the first time around when they didn't read the bill, and they, it was a lot of patriotism, hence the Patriot Act. I remember, and I'm sure you do too, seeing them all sing, "America the Beautiful" or whatever it was on the steps of the Capitol Hill, where everybody at that time, it was considered Congress hadn't been so partisan, and now look at it. But at that point, it was such a big deal that they were all on Capitol Hill, just being patriots, and there's so much camaraderie. And then they passed the Patriot Act, of course. Right. But, it didn't take long for folks to realize, beyond the racial and xenophobic implications of it, it didn't take long for folks on the left and even center left to realize this is not a good bill. This is not a good act. But yet, it was renewed. And I'm just like, there are so many aspects of what concerns me about this. We'll start with Obama, I think, because, the Bush years, there were a lot of missed opportunities. And obviously when Kerry lost, it made it a little bit more difficult. Won that back the House, but again, it's been a little bit difficult. But under the Obama years, this is what I think is so shocking is he won the Democratic nomination because he was the anti-war candidate. He was the anti-Iraq war candidate. Yes. And so to see this type of behavior, the Patriot Act, which is arguably, I don't even know if it's arguably, it's unconstitutional, to see this continue and now so many companies, tech companies included, who are becoming partners in this type of spying and monitoring, that it's almost, I don't even know how you break it up. And I think it's an excuse for a lot of these tech companies, whether it's Amazon or others, to say we can't break up, and lawmakers to not want to break them up because they're intertwined in now our national security system. So under Obama, I remember when it was renewed, this was a huge deal that the Patriot Act was renewed, because there's a conscious left, there's a conscious Democratic Party that is against it, and he didn't care.
Not just Democrats. If anything, you're being too charitable, I would say, in that there was dissent about the Patriot Act from across the political spectrum. In fact, one of its most prolific critics turned out to be the Republican who wrote the bill, the one who introduced the bill. I'm thinking of James Sensenbrenner from Wisconsin. When after the Snowden revelations, a decade later, when he finally shined a light on some of the parts of the way the bill was implemented that nobody had seen fit to look at before. And I could get into the story there of 10 years of congressional dysfunction, courts burying their heads in the sand. So the courageous whistleblower comes forward, reveals to the public what's happening. The author of the Patriot Act became one of its critics. And he said, what I meant to introduce in 2001 was a robust, targeted surveillance authority. And what the government turned it into was a mass surveillance authority straight out of the pages of, frankly, to try to lay it at the feet of the Warsaw Pact or the East German Stasi. It is also too kind, because there's never been a surveillance apparatus in the history of humankind like the one that we have built here in the United States, in a country that claims to lead the free world. And you're absolutely right at the industrial co-optation here. This very much fits a pattern The President Eisenhower warned us to fear 70 years ago. This is industry and security. When there is profit in security, it will always lead to corruption. It's the same story, frankly, in for-profit healthcare. People will pay anything if security is the thing that they are seeking. And when somebody is making a buck off it, you can be sure that corruption will then infect the result. And unfortunately, the surveillance arena proves that in a bunch of different ways. One piece of this story that gets forgotten is really important to remember is that there have, in fact, been abuses of the system. The intelligence community describes human intelligence using infiltrators to infiltrate communities as human int. What the NSA does is signals intelligence, sig int. Love int is the colloquial way they refer to agents and contractors of the government using its powerful spying tools to monitor their ex-lovers and spouses. And it's completely corrupt. And it's exactly why we can't trust secret systems, because they get bent into people's either personal uses or perhaps the institutional corruption of agencies that want to defend themselves. Remember that, the last time a member of Congress tried to call out any kind of secrecy relating to the national security arena, I'm thinking of it was either 13 or 2014 when Dianne Feinstein tried to expose CIA torture. And the CIA hacked the Senate using the kind of tools that we developed for foreign espionage, but turning it against representatives of the states. And it is, to look at the Patriot Act also to some extent is almost too charitable. It's almost like the base of a tree, but like a poisonous tree on which all kinds of fruit has been growing for 20 years. And, I am generally a favor of reforestation, but if there is any kinds of trees I want to chop down, it would be the unconstitutional ones that threaten our democracy. And unfortunately, that analogy fits all too well, because one abuse has absolutely led to another, and they have expanded over time and become increasingly, as you put it, industrially entrenched. And when you have entire industrial complexes that are dedicated to unconstitutional powers, that is not a problem just for the communities that currently bear the ire of the apparatus. It is a problem for our democracy writ large.
We're going to take a quick break and continue this conversation over the Patriot Act. And I forgot about the Dianne Feinstein aspect of this. I mean, we're doing a retro, look back on the Patriot, the best ofs of the Patriot Act over the last 20 years. If you want to see the full best of,
or the compilation album.
Exactly.
Nice.
We're going to be over at Rokfin.com/the Nomiki Show, or excuse me, Rokfin.com/Nomiki. It's in the ticker. You got it right there. Join us over there. We're going to do a full deep dive on the best ofs of the Patriot Act in the last 20 years and the most recent hits from Speaker Pelosi. You really can't find this anywhere else because we have the one and only Shahid Buttar. All right, we'll see you in a minute. And thanks to everyone who's watching.